Well, now here's something that you haven't seen too long ago. This is that trash pick Dell Dimension 2300 computer. I can zoom in on that right there. Actually, just move the camera closer to it. You can see the model number. You can also see that this thing has made a remarkable change from the filthy, dirty, neglected thing that it was to a much cleaner and nicer computer. There's no longer a bunch of filth in between the two optical drives. The floppy drive was an interesting case. I actually did end up replacing it. Although the original drive would work if I pulled a trick that's well known to owners of mediocre, if not poor, turntables everywhere. The top read-write head was actually not making contact with the disk surface, so I put a bunch of coins on it to make it heavier and force it to be weighed down, and then it read and write disks just fine. And while I probably wasn't above, say, supergluing all those coins to the read-write head, I have so many good floppy drives in storage that I just pulled one out of storage and popped it in this machine. And while it's not quite perfect, I had to do a little modification. I had to take the front bezel off the drive, and of course the eject button, the rod that presses the eject button sticks out a little further than it normally does with the Dell official drive, but I didn't pay Dell's official price either. So it's got a working floppy drive in it, and cleaned up down there too. Turn it around here so you can see the back of it. I don't think I have too much more cord on my lamp here. You can see that I've cleaned the power supply up. I actually took this machine completely down to pieces, and I did not put it in the dishwasher. You know, I think a lot of you were expecting me to do that. I probably will do that with the other Dimension. I think that's a 4100. But this one, I actually hand washed it. I actually took the power supply all apart, took the fan out of it, and hand washed it. I had to replace this fan. I don't know what it is about these JMC Daytech fans that Dell used, but they seem to like to fail after a number of years, and I've tried re-oiling the bearings in them when they start getting noisy, and nothing seems to fix them. You can also see how I cleaned just about all the nasty funk out of the ports. There's still a little bit there underneath the VGA port, but not enough to worry about. Cleaned that out pretty well. There was some I couldn't get to down there. The insides also made a rather amazing recovery here. Go ahead and pull this off. Hopefully I can do it one-handed. Nope, doesn't look that way. Okay, there's the inside. As you can see, it's much cleaner than it ever was before. Also hand washed the motherboard, took it out of there, pulled the battery. Didn't replace it because the stock battery actually seems to be okay. So I just left that the way it was. I neatened up the cable routing a little bit here for all these unused power wires by just putting a rubber band around them. I really despise it when people zip tie stuff in computers. That's just one of my pet peeves. Now this green baffle here is actually supposed to lift up, but I've got to admit this thing's got me puzzled, because if you try to just lift it up, it doesn't actually work. Oops, I just popped the fan loose out of its shroud in the back of the machine. It should just pivot and lift up, but it actually binds on this edge here. I'm not sure quite what's up with that, so I figured out a relatively inelegant method toward getting the fan out of here, which now I'm going to have to do because obviously I've kind of discombustionated it there. But oh well, let's just see the motherboard. Those capacitors were coated in filth, as was that heatsink over there, and of course the processor heatsink as well. So this machine has made a nice little recovery. I gave it a real good cleaning, and it looks and smells a whole lot better than it did. There was also a ton I really couldn't believe. Oh, and for those who are wondering, this little resistor thing came with the fan. It's to slow it down, but it seems to slow it down a little more than I'd like, so I may make another one of those at some point, because the fan plugged directly into the motherboard header. The way Dell did this, there's a thermal sensing bulb on the original fan, but the new fan doesn't have that, so it just runs wide open all the time, which probably isn't good for its longevity, because it is a cheap fan with who knows how many miles on it, because it's certainly not new. But there's a lot of filth packed up in behind the front cover here, and again, I don't know if I can do this one-handed, so I guess I'll just set the camera down for a moment. And there's the front end of the machine. This grid right in front of the hard drive here was completely choked with filth and ick, and it is all cleaned out now. It's another one of those Maxtor Fireball drives. You can just kind of see the Maxtor logo in there, maybe, from when Quantum got out of the hard drive business and seemingly Maxtor was bleeding off old stock. It's a 40 gigabyte drive. Then up there's the new floppy, and you can see how it's been modified, how it has no front on it. Also took those USB ports off and cleaned them real well. And this thing's working really nicely, but I've wiped the hard drive and I haven't had time to put a new operating system on it yet. Not sure what I might do for an operating system. Might put some kind of, might actually try to run something like PCBSD on a proper system as opposed to trying to shoehorn it onto something ancient that really isn't up to the challenge. But that's not really what I want to talk about in this video, even though I've spent a fair time yakking about it so far. Let me turn to that. Nope, here's the actual point of the video. Advanced format hard drives. Those of you who've been watching my videos for quite a while might just remember the video that I made about a bad month for hard drives, where I talked about having to turn in a Samsung HD204UI drive because it appeared to be bad. Well, I've got another drive over here. This is a Western Digital WD20 EARS Caviar Green. This is a 2 terabyte drive, and it too features the advanced format technology. Now, for those of you not familiar with advanced format hard drives, and I don't know how prevalent they are pre-installed in new computers just yet. I don't think they're terribly common, but they are becoming more common if you buy a large capacity, i.e. 1 terabyte or larger hard drive. So it's very likely if you do that, you will end up with an advanced format drive. Well, the thing about advanced format drives is that they use a 4 kilobyte per sector allocation as opposed to the old 512 bytes per sector that was traditional for basically the entire history of hard drives in IBM personal computers, compatibles, and of course some Macintoshes as well. Well, the problem with this is these drives appear to tell a lot of lies in their firmware. Every one of them that I have tried, basically these two, the WD20 EARS or EARS and Samsung's HD204UI, both seem to indicate to basically every piece of software that I have tried running on these that they have 512 bytes per sector, but that's not really true. They have 4 kilobytes per sector. And so there's definitely an issue there because that throws off your disk geometry calculations in some way. And it's not entirely clear what you're supposed to do about this if you run, say, a non-Windows or a non-Macintosh operating system. Now, the other operating systems, such as Linux and BSD and FreeNAS, which is, of course, based on BSD, they've caught up. But the simple fact of the matter is, there's still a lot of mystery surrounding these things, and it doesn't help that the firmware in these drives seems to tell a lot of stories. Well, anyway, this is what I want to pass on to people. Something that I learned, and I learned the hard way. You see, a number of my FreeNAS builds have used this serial ATA card, and yes, it has a parallel ATA channel on it that is based on the, VIA VT6421 serial ATA controller. Now, the nice thing about the VIA chip, not only is it cheap, but it's also pretty reliable. It works well, especially in older computer systems that are likely candidates for use with FreeNAS. In particular, I have one of these things running in the HP Vectra Pentium Pro that I am actually using as an Apple time capsule, and it has never given me the slightest bit of trouble. Now, that's not to say that the VT6421 chip is without its issues. It certainly does have some issues, in particular earlier revisions of the chip, in particular those that are just VT6421s without the A or with a letter behind them other than A, have a problem with serial ATA speed negotiation. If you plug in a 3 gigabit per second device into a card based on an early revision VT6421 chip, chances are the drive will not be seen, which is a mystifying problem, and why a lot of older 3 gigabit per second serial ATA drives have got a jumper on them to force them down to the 1.5 gigabit per second speed. But that's really the only serious problem that this VIA adapter card has. Until recently, I'm afraid I discovered another. As I mentioned over here, I returned this drive to Samsung because not only did it give indications that it was bad, I mean, it was throwing all kinds of errors under FreeNAS and stuff like that, really wasn't going along very well at all. And it actually failed Samsung's own testing utility, and that pretty much gave it a free pass to be replaced. Well, I've come to realize some things since then that I'm going to tell you about, and I realized that I probably turned in a drive that there really wasn't anything wrong with. Likewise, I also had a lot of trouble with this one. And both of these were in use in different systems. The only thing that was in common was this thing over here, the VT6421 serial ATA card. I really don't know why this is, because the VT6421, as with any other modern so-called disk controller, is really nothing more than a pathway to the system bus. That's all it is. And I would love to get a data sheet for this thing just to be sure of that, but I am pretty sure that, based on looking at competing designs for which I was able to find data sheets, in particular the silicon image controllers like the SII 3112 and the 3114 and the 3512, which are the only competition that VIA has unless you go to, like, say, a Promise card or something like that. Anyway, I don't know why it is, but when you pair an advanced format hard drive with one of these VT6421 cards, it absolutely doesn't work. You get all kinds of DMA read and write errors, both of the conventional type and also the 48-bit specific ones that allow large drives to be accessed. And you get data corruption, just all kinds of bad news. I really can't figure out what goes so terribly wrong with this thing that makes it not work. But I thought I'd give you a heads up, all of you YouTube viewers and regular watchers of things on my channel, that if you're going to build yourself a FreeNAS and use one of these controller cards, you would do very well not to use it with advanced format hard drives. I've tried this setup in a number of different computers, including this little Dimension 2300 back here, and the results have all been the same. So invariably it is the controller card that is at fault, and I guess there's some kind of a logic bug in the VIA chip. I'm just not sure what it was, but I know that it results in major problems with these advanced format hard drives. So you definitely don't want to pair these things together because they don't work. Unfortunately, it does cause kind of a problem because, like I say, your only real competition for a relatively cheap card, unless you go to, say, one of the Promise ones, which I don't know much about because I've never used them, are the ones from Silicon Image, and those definitely have issues with older computers and older PCI buses. Well, there you have it. That's pretty much everything I wanted to say in this little computer-specific video. So if you have a comment, by all means, feel free to leave one below. And thank you for watching.